Well, hey, Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols, and I am here with Jeff Cavins from Ascension Press, and he really pioneered the concept behind the Great Adventure Bible. And a lot of things that we see from Ascension Press are in part due to the efforts that he's put in. And I'm really excited to talk about some of the things that he's done. So we're going to start off with a few questions. First of all, just introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's good to be on your show. I admire your show, and I've been following you for quite some time. And I just enjoy people that love to talk about Bibles, both the content and the quality of them. So kudos to you. Yeah, I was raised Catholic in the United States, Minnesota, and at 18 had a pretty powerful conversion experience. Gave my life to the Lord in college, and ended up in Bible college in Dallas, Texas, Christ for the Nations Institute, and after there, I went into broadcasting school, and I ended up leaving the Catholic Church after a bit of time there. And I started working with the Assembly of God, an Open Bible Standard. And I ended up going back to school, and I was ordained a Protestant pastor. So for 12 years, I was a pastor, and 7 years in Minneapolis, five in Dayton, Ohio. And then over a period of time, I studied my way back into the Catholic Church with Scripture, and that was my love, that was my passion. That's all I did with most of my life is study Scripture, and I ended up back in the Catholic Church, teaching at Franciscan University in Steubenville, and had a television show on EWTN, and just continued. And I kind of came across when I was 25 years old as a pastor, and I had a real problem with trying to understand the entire Bible, and this is after Bible college. And you might be able to identify with this. I knew stories in the Bible. I could talk about Abraham. I could talk about Goliath and David. I could talk about any story, but I had a problem in telling the entire story. And so that was my challenge of how I was going to do it. And then one day I was getting ready to go into my Hebrew class at the University of Minnesota, and I was sitting there listening to William Sanford Lasore, a Fuller professor, talking about the history of archaeology. And he went through it in chronological order. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I thought I'd like to do that with scripture. And so I was sitting in the car listening to this. And then suddenly I thought, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be able to tell the story. And I had this in my mind, this chart. And the chart looked like this. It was a timeline chart, front and back, and it had the entire Bible on it. And I had this idea that what I could do is I could divide the Bible up into 12 periods of salvation history. Make the complex simple. And then after 12 periods of salvation history, then what I'd do is I would pick out the books that were narrative. Then I would pull those out, and there was 14 of them that I pulled out. And then I would show people how the other books fit in to those 12 color coded periods and those narrative books. So that's what I saw in my mind. I thought, yeah, I could do that. And I could create the chart in such a way that all the characters, all the events, all the history would be on there, and that simplicity would win the day on it. People would look at it and get it. And so I didn't go to Hebrew that day. I got at the car in reverse, and I went to an arts and crafts store. I bought a bunch of materials. I went to a meat market and got a big piece of white paper. Came home, and on my mother-in-law's basement table, put this great big piece of paper out there, and I created in 48 hours basically the chart. And I was just a young pastor at the time, but it helped me to understand the story of salvation history. And I realized in talking to my people, both when I was a pastor and then after coming back to the Catholic Church, that it's not the want to that's the problem, it's the how to. And so as I started showing people how to read the Bible as a complete story, it just snowballed and got bigger and bigger and bigger, and to what we're dealing with today with the Great Adventure Bible and the Great Adventure studies, as well as Bible in a Year that I do with Father Mike Schmitz. So that's kind of the long and short of it, is that it all began as just a young pastor who really felt inadequate.
Yeah, so my big takeaway from that is that the Great Adventure Bible was birthed out of you skipping Hebrew class.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what's funny is my mother-in-law has a degree in Hebrew, and my wife, she's a biblical archaeologist. She works with Veritas University, and she has a degree in Hebrew. So
Wow.
I don't have a degree in Hebrew, but all of the ladies that are important in my life have one.
My story, just in short, I was raised in the Catholic Church, born into the Catholic Church. My family was nominal when it came to serving the Lord. They weren't very devoted. So I grew up in an alcohol and drug addiction situation in
Mm.
my home. But my grandparents were very devoted. Robert and Mary Clifford, they loved the church. And my grandfather was on the parish council. He also served as one of the main ushers. My grandmother was the main church organist. So they started picking me up on Sundays and giving me a ride to church, and I would go with them every Sunday. And my grandfather was very structured, two honks, and if you weren't out there just a couple minutes, then you were walking to church. So after I heard that second honk, I made sure and rushed out there. And afterwards, if I was fortunate, they would take me to breakfast, and I always really enjoyed that. But I really felt like a rock star when it came to being part of that church. It was St. Cecilia Parish in the west end of Louisville, and having my grandmother on the organ and my grandfather serving such a prominent role, I felt like a really big deal as a kid. I was
Sure.
probably 9, 10 years old when all this began. And by the time I was 13, I started having some pretty big questions that my parish couldn't answer. And I started struggling with some of the same things my parents did, kind of got into some drugs and got myself out of it and got back into the Catholic Church. My grandfather actually got me on the parish council at 18 years old. I was the youngest member of the parish council in that church's history.
You were
And
serious.
yeah, but unfortunately fell back into drugs again and really got my life messed up.
Hmm.
And when I converted, I became a Protestant. I got saved in an Assembly of God church. So we kind of have a common thread
Hmm.
there, and ultimately became an Assembly of God pastor, which I still am today. And I do have a deep respect for my Catholic roots and my Catholic upbringings. Obviously, I wouldn't be a Protestant if I was in 100% agreement with the
Sure.
Catholic Church. That's probably what underlines and kind of the foundation of the way that I review Catholic material and the way that I treat Catholic folks is
Yeah.
because of my upbringing and being able to see how they were really devoted. My grandparents really were a beautiful example of what it meant to be a Catholic. And I admire them to this day. I just really respect them. I still have my grandfather's rosary. I have his Bible. So
Wow. I have my grandpa's Bible behind me here.
yeah, so I have a lot of
Yeah.
respect for it. I really just appreciate you coming and being willing to have this conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to clear up some misconceptions maybe on both ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah, well, on that note, I would say that in listening to you over these last couple of years or so, you're very kind, and that shows. You know, when people treat each other, whether they're Catholic or non-denominational or evangelical, whatever it might be, and they go about their work with kindness and love. That
Mhm.
shows in you, and so that got my attention. You know, sometimes people get a little used to being beat up. You know.
Yeah, on both ends of the spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that story with me and Jeff and just really learning a little bit about each other and learning about how the foundation of the Great Adventure Bible was laid. It's just really a cool story. It's interesting that he started off as he was a Protestant pastor and then ultimately moved into when he became a Catholic and ultimately became a Catholic published work. Pretty fascinating. I'm at the house today. We're expecting some bad weather, so I probably won't make it to the office in the morning to record, but I wanted you to be able to check out this intro to the Great Adventure Catholic Bible and Jeff Cavins and the work that he did in order to make this happen. And there's a few more pieces to this series I'll be putting together. There's going to be a little bit of controversy where we talk about some stuff that we disagree on. But one thing I want to warn you about now is the goal of this series is not for me to dish on the Catholic Church and to share every area where I disagree, but to really let someone who is a Catholic share what they believe, and then you can make your own decision. God bless you. Keep calm. Jesus on.